In the name of God. Amen. Good morning. On Wednesday morning, I woke up, as usual, like most of you, wearing white skin. I didn't notice it until about 10:30 in the morning when I decided to take a break. I went outside to pull some weeds, and I heard sirens. I prayed briefly for whoever it was that was in trouble. I also prayed that it wasn't a black person, for whom sirens are often a sign that things are going to get worse. Think of just a few stories in the news where the person with the uniform and the gun eventually explains, "Well, we thought you were driving a stolen car. Did you know the light on your license plate isn't working? I don't think you're having a seizure. I think you're on drugs. You match the description of two teenagers we were looking for. We got a call saying someone who doesn't belong here was looking at the houses. Can you prove that this is really your house?" No one has ever asked me those kind of questions. No realtor has ever met me in person after only talking to me over the phone and assuming that I was white, and then suddenly saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that house was just sold." Years ago, I told my then fiancée Linnell back in my mostly black hometown of Detroit, it's really a miracle that all black people are not paranoid. If something bad happens to a black person involving a white person, it could easily have been racism. And if something good happens, well, it might just be due to a white liberal feeling guilty, which is still racism. Or it might be bad luck. Or it might be non-racist karma. One of Linnell's black co-workers once said, "Thank God it's Friday. The whole weekend, I don't have to deal with a single white person. What a relief." Now, especially in places like Minnesota where we don't want to talk about unpleasantness, a black person can get exhausted wondering whether what just happened was racist or not. So it's best to avoid possible confrontations. So don't call the police. Don't complain to the principal unless it's really bad. Don't ask to speak to the manager. Just go home. Tell your spouse. And make sure your kids know that everything they do will be seen by most white people as an example of blackness. I always wear my white skin. My black students, colleagues, and friends are always black, even when they might wish to keep their race invisible or irrelevant or unknown. Our society is built on race consciousness, race stratification. Now, unlike my race or my gender, I can usually conceal my political identity or my profession if I want to. Most of the time, in fact, I don't wear my clerical collar. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to have airplane seatmates, remember flying, tell me what they think of organized religion or apologize for poor church attendance. But my whiteness, like my maleness, is always on display, and it's just about always to my advantage. I was reminded by that siren that black people don't get to delete their morning email reminder without reading it. No thanks. I'd rather not do any anti-racism today. I'm really trying to be productive. Got a lot of work I got to get done. Nor can Asians or Hispanics or so many other folks who are kept at the margins of American life just delete that fact for the day. Now, I am not sure how our scriptures help us with that problem today. Elijah, a fanatical and seriously badass prophet, is pursued by vengeful enemies. God rescues him and appears to him in a cave in a very gentle way. And instead of the expected windstorm, earthquake, and fire, it's just a still small voice, which is a beautiful image. And then he gets fresh instructions. Crown 2 kings who will eventually get rid of the aforementioned vengeful enemies. Still small voice, though. That's a beautiful image. But the voice of God Wednesday morning was the sirens, and it wasn't announcing good news. And the other story we heard, the one of Jesus trying to sleep after having his disciples feed 5,000 people, and he's awakened by the wind and worried about his friends out there straining at the oars. He goes walking to them on the water. And Peter says, "Oh, me too." And for a few seconds it works until he notices the wind. Jesus rescues him and the wind stops. Where's the way of love lesson here? Where's the anti-racism message? Are we supposed to have more faith than Peter? Supposed to believe that God will miraculously come to rescue us? Honestly, do I believe that Jesus really walked on water? Yeah, I'm not sure. But somehow Jesus can come to us when we're headed for a shipwreck. Somehow God can find us when we're hiding in our emotional caves, scared and depressed. And even though God can make whirlwinds, earthquakes, and fires, God's voice is as likely to be a whisper as it is a roar. So if I want to talk about the way of love, where is the good news in these two stories? Is it good news or just the truth that, like Elijah, you can be reassured that God is with you, but now you need to get back to your work, which is being a nurse and walking into an ICU full of COVID, wearing your fresh PPE and thinking, you're going to be all right. But yeah, it's scary. Is the good news that we're all in the boat and the wind feels like we're going to be swamped, but Jesus is keeping an eye on us? Should we, knowing this story, have more faith than Peter the Rock? And if we do, will we be able to walk all the way back to the boat and get in? Does the still small voice tell us we can walk on water? Or does it just say, okay, back to work? Does that soft whisper of a conscience tell us something about love, that it's the tiny and the gentle dimensions of things that matter more than the huge and the frightening ones? Two invisible plagues menace us. One is a virus, a natural plague, and we are right to fear the grim and mindless spread of this unrelenting bug. The other plague is an idea, a social sin. We are right to despair that racism is the organizing principle of where we live, of who we go to school with, who we have in our family, and who we worship with. In my case, a siren somewhere in the neighborhood made me remember my whiteness, that invisible force field of good fortune that smooths my path. If the siren had been wailing for me, I likely would have been glad for the help, but it wasn't. That squad car or ambulance was headed for somebody in trouble, and I found myself praying that they were not going to make it worse. And then I went back to twisting plantains out by the roots and trying to get the whole creeping Charlie vine. You have to pull it out gently or you'll just rip out the leaves. And next week, it's true, some new leaves will have grown back. So therefore, you have to tug and maybe dig to get the root out. Next year, the dandelions and the crabgrass will be back. But somehow, this just helps me. Somehow, the work of weeding is meditation. That's what I tell people, and I mean it. After hearing God's soft whisper, Elijah was able to get back to being the biggest badass prophet in the Bible. After Jesus finished calming the storm, the disciples were able to get back to the shore. We all have things to uproot, battles to fight, storms to weather. I go to church because being with you, doing what we do here, helps me remember God is love. If I pay attention, I can calm my fear and despair. Connecting to God is sometimes undramatic, like a still small voice. It's sometimes incredible, like walking on water. Time will tell whether all the weeding is merely calming or has actually helped me find more of the tangled vines and roots of my white American self. Amen. Have a good week.